The gavel drops. Keanu Reeves never saw himself as someone who belonged in a courtroom. He wasn't a lawyer, and he wasn't looking for a fight. But life has a strange way of placing people in roles they never auditioned for. It all started with a letter, thin, beige, and stamped with the state seal. A subpoena. Keanu unfolded it with puzzled fingers, eyebrows furrowing as he scanned the lines. He was being summoned for a case involving intellectual property theft. Not as a witness. Not as a defendant, but as an intervener, a technical term his lawyer explained, meaning the case could affect his foundation's work. At first, Keanu considered letting the legal team handle it quietly. He had 100 other things to focus on. His humanitarian projects, the children's hospital he was funding, the clean water initiative across rural communities. But one clause in the document stopped him cold. The opposing counsel had filed a motion to invalidate the patents on a low-cost medical device Keanu's team had developed. A device saving lives in under-resourced clinics across the globe. "They're trying to gut it," he murmured, staring at the paper. "They're trying to take something meant for healing and turn it into leverage." Against the advice of his publicist and even his own legal team, Keanu chose to appear in court himself. Not as a celebrity, not as an actor, but as a man who refused to let greed strangle hope. The courtroom was grand, marbled with years of history, and stained glass windows that caught the morning sun like kaleidoscopes. Rows of benches lined the room, some occupied by journalists with cameras hidden in notepads, others by curious onlookers who came not for the law, but for the man who played Neo in John Wick. But Keanu didn't walk in with fanfare. He wore a simple dark suit. No entourage, no sunglasses. Just a leather-bound notebook tucked under his arm and a quiet sense of determination. Judge Marlene Carter, a stern woman in her late 60s with sharp glasses and sharper wit, raised an eyebrow when he stepped up. "Mr. Reeves," she said dryly, glancing over her glasses. "I assume you're here to observe, not perform." A few people chuckled. Even the opposing counsel, a high-priced litigator named Daniel Crewson, smirked. Keanu didn't flinch. "No performance, Your Honor. I'm here to speak on behalf of the lives this case will impact." Judge Carter leaned back, curious now. "You're not an attorney." "No, ma'am, but I've read every document, and I believe facts and compassion can stand together." The court stenographer paused. Even she seemed moved by his tone. Crewson, however, stood and gave a theatrical bow. "Your Honor, while we appreciate Mr. Reeves's passion, the law is not a place for amateur philosophy. It is a place for precision and expertise." "We'll see," the judge replied. "Proceed." The next 2 hours felt like a battle of ideologies. Crewson presented spreadsheets, legal precedents, and profit projections. He argued that the patents Keanu's foundation used were outdated, acquired through unconventional means, and should be invalidated to allow market competition. "In simple terms," Crewson concluded, "we're opening the door for innovation. Mr. Reeves, while well-intentioned, is blocking progress." Keanu rose slowly. "Respectfully, Mr. Crewson speaks of competition as if the market were a race. But the people using this device are not running. They are dying." He clicked a remote and a slide flickered onto the screen. A photo of a malnourished child in a rural clinic, clinging to life with the help of the very device in question. "This isn't about controlling patents," Keanu said. "It's about protecting access." He told the story of Dr. Lena Morales, a physician in a war-torn zone who wrote to his team, saying their invention saved 27 infants in 2 months. He showed letters, testimonials, data, and then he revealed a fact no one in the courtroom expected. "The device generates no profit," he said. "We gave the design away to 50 different nonprofits. The only ones trying to patent it now are the ones who didn't build it." Judge Carter sat forward. "Are you saying you waived all intellectual property rights?" Keanu nodded. "Because life comes before licensing." The courtroom fell silent. Even Crewson seemed briefly lost for words. But the momentary silence didn't last. "That's noble," he finally said. "But it doesn't change the fact that the law must protect order, not sentiment." Keanu's eyes didn't leave him. Then maybe it's time to change what the law protects. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a quiet revolution, unfolding, beneath the watchful eyes of wooden carvings and rustling robes. After the session, Keanu stepped outside. Microphones surged toward him, but he raised a hand gently. "This isn't about me," he said. "This is about a little girl named Tasmia, who smiled again because of that machine. It's about her mother who got to hold her daughter one more night." The cameras caught every word. And while some dismissed him as emotional, others saw something deeper. Integrity sharpened not by courtrooms, but by the silent promises we make when no one is watching. And back inside, Judge Carter looked again, at her docket, her pen hovering over a motion she had almost signed the night before. But something in her had changed. "Court adjourned for now," she said softly. "Mr. Reeves, you will be given standing." The gavel dropped, but this was far from the end. The case. Within the case, the morning after his first court appearance, Keanu Reeves sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the empty mug between his hands. The headlines were everywhere. Keanu Reeves takes on big. Pharma and emotional courtroom speech. Actor brings courtroom to silence with story of child saved by unpatented device. But he wasn't smiling. This wasn't a role. There was no script, no director calling cut. This was real life. And real lives were still on the line. The media frenzy didn't matter to him. What mattered was the hearing next week. The one that could determine whether or not his foundation's invention would be handed over to a corporate giant aiming to trademark, modify, and sell it at a price 10 times its current cost. A device that once cost less than a fast food meal could suddenly become out of reach for millions. He had received another call last night, from Dr. Lena Morales. She sounded worried. "They're sending legal teams to the clinics," she said. "They want to audit the usage. Keanu, they're intimidating the doctors." His heart dropped. This was more than a legal battle. It was a quiet invasion. "I'll handle it," he said calmly. But even he didn't know how yet. Keanu didn't have a law degree, but he had something more powerful: focus. As the sun rose that day, he called his foundation's lead researcher, Zane Caleb. Zane, a former tech innovator turned bioengineer, had built the original schematics of the portable oxygen infusion unit, called LIFO. "Zane, I need the full chain of design ownership. Every version, every open-source submission log, every timestamp," Keanu said. Zane sounded tense. "They're claiming that one of the design elements was lifted from a patent filed in 2011. They think we used a component related to their pressure regulator valve." "Did we?" Keanu asked. "Absolutely not," Zane replied. "We reverse-engineered ours from a Soviet-era survival kit that's in public domain. Their claim is bogus, but they're hoping no one will dig that far." Keanu didn't hesitate. "Then we'll dig." Days passed in a flurry of research, document reviews, and interviews. Keanu didn't rely solely on his lawyers. He went into the archives himself, pulling decades-old medical journals, ordering translated diagrams from Russian and Ukrainian field manuals, and even contacting a retired medic who had worked on the original Soviet design. "You're serious?" The man, Yuri Dimitrov, asked over a video call. "You're an actor." "I am," Keanu replied. "But I'm also someone who believes no one should die because of a greedy lawyer." Yuri chuckled. "Well said. I'll send you the manual and the original photos." That night, Keanu printed out every page and stayed up till dawn, highlighter in hand. On the next court date, Judge Marlene Carter glanced at the packed courtroom. This time, law students filled the benches, activists, journalists, even a few engineers. As Keanu stepped forward again, she sighed with amusement. "Mr. Reeves, back to represent the underdog?" He smiled politely. "Your Honor, I've come with evidence the opposing side may have overlooked." Cruson groaned. "Here we go. Your Honor, may I remind the court that Mr. Reeves is not certified? Legal counsel?" "You may remind us," the judge replied. "But you may not silence someone granted standing in this court." Keanu nodded. I'd like to introduce an original design source, one that predates the component in question by more than 2 decades. He pulled up a scanned diagram, a yellowed page showing a crude but functional pressure valve. The caption below in faded Cyrillic read, Eksterny kislorodny regulator, 97 Krusen tried to interrupt. This proves nothing, but Keanu held up an affidavit. This is from Yuri Dimitrov, a Soviet field medic. He used this design in the late 80s. He also confirmed that it was declassified into the public domain by 1993. He walked slowly across the courtroom. What we created wasn't stolen. It was built on publicly available technology, updated with modern materials and distributed for free. We asked for nothing in return. But these companies, they saw opportunity in our generosity. Judge, Carter took the affidavit and leafed through it. Silence stretched. Then she looked up at Krusen. Do you have any rebuttal documentation to dispute the public domain status of this design? Krusen looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Not at this moment. Then sit down, the judge said coolly. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. A win? Not yet. But Keanu had made it harder for the corporations to push their claim. After the session, a young man approached Keanu outside the courthouse. He was in his 20s, thin, wearing hospital scrubs. You don't know me, he said, voice shaking. I work in pediatric care, one of your unit. It saved my niece. She couldn't breathe and we were out of options. Keanu put a hand on his shoulder. I'm glad it helped her. No, the man insisted, eyes wet. You don't understand. That machine is the reason she's still alive. They can't. Take it away. Please, don't let them. Keanu nodded. I won't. He meant it. Later that night, Keanu walked through the city, alone, thinking. Hollywood had taught him many things, how to pretend, how to fight on screen, how to lose himself in roles. But this wasn't a film. This was real, and he felt something stir in him. He hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Conviction. He thought about all the times he had sat by hospital beds. The loss of his daughter. The pain of watching someone suffer, powerless to help. Maybe this was why he was here. Maybe every tragedy had led to this fight. Across town, in a luxury law firm's glass tower, Krusen paced like a caged tiger. He's dangerous, he told his partner. Not legally, emotionally. People believe him, they feel for him. The partner raised an eyebrow. So what do we do? Krusen stared out the window. We bury him, drown him in procedure, motion after motion until he runs out of time. The war had just begun. And Keanu Reeves, actor, philanthropist, and now a silent warrior of justice, wasn't backing down. The next hearing would be critical. And in the shadows, plans were being made to shut him down. But they didn't understand. Something. You can defeat an argument, you can dismiss emotion, but you can't extinguish a man on fire with purpose. Traps, truths, and a test of resolve. Keanu Reeves stood before the mirror in a small hotel room just blocks away from the courthouse. His suit jacket hung perfectly on the chair beside him, but he hadn't put it on yet. Instead, he stared at his own reflection, searching for strength in tired eyes that hadn't slept much in the past 72 hours. The air outside was gray and heavy. Rain whispered against the windows. Keanu had seen this weather before, on movie sets in foreign lands, on nights he couldn't forget. It always felt like something was waiting on the other side of the storm. He tightened his tie. There was no script today, no rehearsed lines. What he was walking into was no longer just a courtroom. It was a battlefield. This session was different. As he stepped into the courthouse lobby, Keanu noticed an odd tension. Men in suits gathered in tight circles. Unfamiliar faces roamed the halls with badges that weren't court-related. They whispered and looked his way. Something was off. His foundation's lead attorney, Melissa Trang, met him at the elevators. Her face was pale. They filed a motion for dismissal this morning, she said quickly, arguing you've interfered with the legal process by using your celebrity status to pressure the court of public opinion. Keanu blinked. That's... what? They claim your media coverage is contaminating the case. Keanu didn't smile. I didn't ask for media, I just told the truth. Melissa handed him a folder. They've also subpoenaed your internal emails, and Zane's. His chest tightened. They're digging. They're hunting Keanu, she said softly. They want to find one misstep, one tiny mistake, and use it to ruin everything. Keanu stayed silent for a long second, then nodded. Let them dig. We've got nothing to hide. Inside Courtroom 3C, the energy felt more like a trial than a hearing. The opposing counsel's table now held 5 attorneys. Daniel Crewson sat in the middle, smug as ever, surrounded by paper stacks that looked like mountains. Judge Carter tapped her gavel. Court is in session. Crewson stood immediately. Your Honor, before we continue, we ask the court to recognize the significant media disruption surrounding this case. The public has been exposed to one-sided narratives that undermine fair process. Keanu calmly stepped forward. Your Honor, I have not conducted a single interview. The only reason this is public is because people care about the truth. Care is not a legal defense, Crewson snapped. Judge Carter looked over her glasses. Nor is media attention grounds for dismissal. Motion denied. Crewson didn't hide his frustration, but he had more up his sleeve. Then we request an evidentiary review of all internal communications by Mr. Reeves and his foundation staff. We believe relevant content may show a pattern of improper development and distribution of the medical device at the heart of this dispute. A hush fell over the room. Melissa stood quickly. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition designed to bury my client in paperwork and stall proceedings. But the judge sighed. I understand that. But since you claim transparency, Mr. Reeves, do you object? Keanu didn't hesitate. No objection. We'll provide everything. Crewson smiled. But Keanu saw it for what it was. Not victory, but fear wearing arrogance like a mask. That afternoon, the Foundation's small office turned into a war zone. Computers hummed. Assistants printed email threads. Zane brought in folders from storage. The team moved fast, assembling every version of the design prototype, timestamps, correspondence with clinics, requests for help, all clean, honest, human. But beneath it all, tension simmered. Melissa pulled Keanu aside in the hallway. We may be clean, but they only need one thing they can twist, even a sentence out of context. He nodded. We'll take that risk. Later that night, after everyone else had gone home, Keanu sat alone in the darkened office. His hand rested on an old black and white photo taped to the inside of a drawer. It showed a little girl sitting beside a hospital bed, smiling weakly at the camera. Beside her was a nurse. Behind the nurse was Keanu. He remembered the girl's name, Elisa. She had passed away 6 months after that photo. But during her last few weeks, she had played the violin. She had painted birds on her window. She had told Keanu once, "Thank you for helping me feel safe." He closed his eyes. That was the moment he knew he had to build something lasting. Not a film, not a fortune, something that mattered. And now powerful people wanted to take it away. The next court session began with a surprise. Crewson stood again, this time holding a printed email. Your Honor, we have uncovered an email from Mr. Reeves's lead engineer, Zane Caleb, dated a year before the current lawsuit. It contains the phrase, and I quote, "I worry the original design might be too close to the one we discussed in the early version from MIT's archives." A gasp moved through the room. Keanu turned toward Zane, who was sitting behind him, face pale. Your Honor, Crewson continued, this shows even their own engineer had concerns about infringement. Melissa immediately stepped in. Your Honor, this is cherry-picking. The full email chain clarifies that Mr. Caleb was referring to design inspiration, not replication. Judge Carter asked for the full chain. After reading it carefully, she nodded. This line taken alone is misleading, but the full thread clearly shows intent to build a completely original device. Objection sustained. Crewson tried again, this time referencing a donation made to one of the clinics using the device. Was it a bribe? He asked. Keanu didn't let him finish. No, it was a blanket gift of medical supplies. To a hospital that was running out. Of gloves and saline. Courtroom scoffed. Some would say that creates bias. Keanu looked directly at him. Some would say saving lives is more important than looking neutral. The judge sat back. Mr. Reeves, would you take the stand? Today? Yes, Your Honor. Keanu walked to the witness chair. Do you believe your device is more important than the law? He didn't flinch. I believe the law exists to protect the people. And when the law is used to hurt them, it has lost its way. The courtroom was still. Do you regret stepping into this process yourself? The judge asked next. Keanu took a breath. No, because I've seen the faces of the children this helps. I've seen mothers who had nothing, no power, no hospitals, no money. Watch, their babies breathe again. I regret only that I can't do more. The silence that followed was louder than applause. After court recessed for the day, Keanu found Zane waiting for him outside. I'm sorry about the email, Zane said quietly. I didn't think... Keanu interrupted. You were doing your job. Worrying is what makes a good engineer. Zane looked at him, eyes unsure. You're not mad? I'm proud, Keanu replied. Because we're still here, and we're still fighting. That evening, a call came from a clinic in Nigeria. The LIFO unit had just saved its 1,000th patient. Keanu listened silently as a nurse cried over the phone, not because she was sad, but because a little boy had gone home for the first time in 6 weeks. Thank you, she said. Thank you for not giving up. Keanu whispered. Never. But the shadows were growing longer. Courtroom wasn't done. He had filed a sealed request for a judicial ethics review, trying to claim that Judge Carter might be biased based on her past rulings in humanitarian-related cases. If the judge was removed, everything could collapse. Keanu now faced a crossroads. Keep playing defense, or launch a bold counteroffensive, one that could expose the real motive behind the case and possibly cost him everything. He looked at the photo of Elisa again. The choice was clear. A war of silence, a weapon of truth. The next morning, the city felt quieter. Not peaceful, just quiet in that heavy way a sky gets before thunder breaks. Keanu Reeves sat in the back of a rideshare on the way to court. His fingers drummed against his notebook. His mind wasn't on his speech today. It was on the sealed complaint, a move so low even the courtroom whispers had gone silent when it was announced. Courtroom's team had filed a judicial ethics petition against Judge Marlene Carter. They were trying to get her disqualified, using her previous rulings in humanitarian patent cases as proof she was emotionally inclined to favor public welfare over corporate fairness. In short, they were calling her too compassionate to be neutral. As if that's a weakness, Keanu muttered. His driver, an older man with kind eyes, looked into the mirror. You heading to court? Keanu nodded. They talking about you on the radio. Say you're fighting for poor clinics and kids and all that? Trying to. The driver smiled. Don't stop. Keanu gave a grateful nod. By the time Keanu reached the courthouse steps, reporters had already gathered. A barrier held them back, but cameras flashed like it was a movie premiere. But this wasn't Hollywood. There were no red carpets, no limos, no premiere. Just a man walking into a system stacked against him, hoping the truth would be enough. Melissa Trang met him at the security gate, her face stiff. We got a problem. Keanu didn't blink. Tell me. The motion to challenge Judge Carter's ethics has been accepted for review. While it's pending, she's been placed on temporary administrative leave. A new judge is stepping in. Today. He felt like someone had punched the air out of his chest. Who? Judge Langford. Keanu had heard the name before. A textbook. Judge, cold, clinical, strict about procedure. Rumors said he had never ruled in favor of a public interest group in 15 years. They found their opening, Keanu whispered, and walked right through it. Inside, the courtroom felt colder. Literally. The temperature was lower, the lights harsher. Judge Langford entered without the grace Carter had carried. His eyes were unreadable. His voice was sharp. Court is now in session. He wasted no time. Mr. Reeves. Miss Trang, I've reviewed the case docket. You'll need to resubmit your arguments in accordance with my courtroom standards. No videos, no visual presentations. Just facts, law, and precedent. Melissa looked stunned. But, Your Honor, our previous sessions included live testimonials from doctors, irrelevant unless accompanied by sworn deposition. Keanu stepped in, voice calm. Your Honor, real lives hang on this device. These aren't just numbers. This is a court of law, Mr. Reeves, Langford replied, dry as paper, not a charity auction. Keanu sat down slowly. It had begun. The Cold War. The next hours were brutal. Crewson's team moved quickly. They filed 5 procedural motions in under 90 minutes. Each one demanded new evidence, questioned document, authenticity, or attacked Keanu's standing in the case. By lunch, Melissa looked ready to scream. This isn't about winning anymore. They want to bury us under legal mud. Keanu leaned in. Then we give them something they can't bury. Melissa paused. What do you mean? We fight a different way. He opened his notebook and pulled out a thin folder, a private investigation he had quietly commissioned 2 weeks earlier. This, he said, is how they got our design. And it's not how they claimed. Inside the folder were emails. Not his, not Zane's, but from an internal whistleblower, a former employee from one of Crewson's client companies. The emails showed a reverse engineering lab that had received the open-source blueprint from Keanu's foundation, altered 2 components slightly, and filed a patent on top of it. They hadn't built anything. They'd stolen it after it was given freely. You sure about this? Melissa asked. Keanu nodded. I've already verified the IP traces and timestamps. If we drop this, it'll shift everything. It's a nuclear move, she said. It's time. That afternoon, Keanu stood again. This time his voice didn't carry passion. It carried evidence. Your Honor, I respectfully submit newly obtained documents that challenge the core integrity of the opposing counsel's claim. These are internal communications from Zebrix, Pharma Labs, one of the companies trying to claim patent priority. He handed over the folder. Crewson stood furious. This is inadmissible. The chain of custody is unclear. On the contrary, Melissa said, we've notarized the whistleblower affidavit and traced the data sources. Everything checks out. Judge Langford flipped through the pages. His cold eyes squinted slightly. I see accusations of patent trolling, intentional data manipulation, and, references to creating a legal bottleneck to force Keanu Reeves to license what we can't invent. Crewson tried to object again. Your Honor, that was internal brainstorming. Langford held up a hand. Enough. A heavy pause filled the room. Court will recess until tomorrow, Langford said. I need time to review this. And so does the ethics board, apparently. Keanu blinked. The ethics board? Judge Carter's hearing has been expedited. If this evidence is accurate, it could directly impact her suspension. Melissa whispered. We just bought her a way back. Outside the courthouse, something strange happened. The reporters who usually shouted questions were silent. Instead, a small girl stepped forward. She was maybe 10 years old, holding her father's hand. Mr. Reeves, she said. Keanu knelt down. My little brother has that breathing machine. The one you made. Her eyes sparkled. He's home now. Keanu smiled, his voice catching. Thank you for telling me. And in that moment, under gray clouds and sharp camera flashes, the silence of the system cracked. Later that night, Keanu walked back to his hotel room alone. The city still buzzed around him, full of traffic and voices. But he felt something different in his chest. Not hope, momentum. But back at Crewson's firm, the mood was different. He's going to sink us, Crewson said bitterly to his partner. No, the partner replied. We still have one card left. Crewson looked confused. Let's go after the foundation itself. Crewson frowned. The nonprofit? Hit them where it hurts. money, reputation, legality. Audit the donations. Question every transaction. If we can't win in court, we bury the man in scandal. They didn't know it yet, but Keanu was already one step ahead, because sometimes it's not just about building a case, it's about building something they can't break. A purpose, a legacy, a truth so powerful, even silence can't hold it back forever. A tidal wave of lies, and one man standing. The morning of the fifth hearing arrived like a warning. Dark clouds covered the sky above the city, thick and unmoving. It hadn't rained yet, but it would. Something heavy was in the air. Keanu Reeves stood in the hotel lobby, his phone pressed to his ear. Melissa Trang was on the other end, her voice clipped and tense. "They did it," she said. He already knew what she meant. "What's the damage?" Keanu asked. "They filed an emergency injunction to freeze the foundation's funding," she said. "They're claiming we mishandled donations, mixed personal and project funds, and failed to register a device in several countries." Keanu walked toward the revolving door, pushing it slowly. "All lies." "Of course they are," she replied. "But now we're fighting 3 battles. The patent case, the ethics board review, and now a federal financial audit." Keanu stepped into the street. "We handle them, one at a time." Melissa paused. "You're calm." He looked up at the gray sky. "Because the closer they get to losing, the louder they scream." The courtroom was packed tighter than ever. This time more than journalists had shown up. There were medical workers, engineers, law students, and even parents holding children who had once used the LIFO device. Keanu walked in slowly, his face unreadable. Every step he took echoed. But behind his silence was a storm. Judge Langford entered, expression as flat as ever. "We'll begin with preliminary matters," he said. "Counsel for the defense, I understand you've submitted new filings related to nonprofit status." Cruson stood confidently. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe there's enough cause to delay all further proceedings until a full financial investigation is complete. We're concerned about the Foundation's transparency." Melissa rose quickly. "Your Honor, this is an attempt to stall and deflect. The Foundation has passed every audit, every review. We'll comply again, but the case at hand, this patent dispute, must proceed." Langford tapped his fingers on the bench. "I will allow discovery on the financials. However, the patent case proceeds uninterrupted." Cruson gritted his teeth. Keanu watched him carefully. The cracks were showing. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. Judge Carter returned, not to reclaim her seat, but to sit in the audience. When she walked in, the room turned. Even Judge Langford raised an eyebrow. Keanu turned in, his chair, and met her eyes. She gave him the smallest nod. Not permission, not instruction. Trust. Melissa called their next witness, a data scientist named Dr. Aisha Talib, who had run a detailed forensic analysis of the original device blueprints versus the ones Cruson's clients claimed to own. "We found direct code reuse," she testified. "Not inspired, not similar. Identical string structures. Someone lifted the firmware and renamed it." Melissa nodded. "And where was the original code located?" "On Mr. Reeves's public GitHub repository, time-stamped and archived. The data existed openly. Their so-called innovation came later and was nearly a copy." The courtroom buzzed again. Cruson tried to object, but Langford waved him. "Down. Continue," he said to Melissa. She turned to Keanu. "You're our final speaker today." He stood slowly. Keanu walked to the center of the courtroom. Not the podium, not the witness chair, just the open floor. "Your Honor, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a businessman, I'm just someone who believes people deserve a chance to live." He held up a faded photo. It was Elisa, the girl he had helped years ago. "She's the reason I got involved in medical aid. She passed away. But before she did, she gave me a drawing." He turned the paper, childish crayon scribbles of a sun, a bed, and 2 stick figures, one small, one tall. She said, "This is me, and this is the man who made me feel safe." He looked at the courtroom. I've been in a lot of movies. I've played heroes. But that moment, that drawing, was the first time I truly felt like one. He turned to the judge. This case isn't about money. It's about who owns the right to help, and I don't believe anyone should. He paused. We gave this device to the world because the world needed it. If someone wants to improve it, go ahead, build it better, share it freely. But don't lock it behind a price tag. A long silence filled the room. Outside the courthouse, protesters had gathered. Not loud, not angry, just standing quietly with signs that read things like, "Life isn't a product. Let kindness win. Stand with Keanu." Even the press was softer now. Less like sharks, more like people realizing something important was unfolding. But then, the ambush came. Crewson's firm leaked private financial statements to the media, twisted them. Headlines screamed, "Keanu Reeves Foundation under fire for questionable payments." Charity or cover-up? Melissa slammed the paper down in front of Keanu in their meeting room. We knew they'd try something dirty. But this is coordinated, they're going all in. Keanu remained calm. Then so do we. He reached for a file, another investigation he had quietly run. Not on himself, on them. The next morning in court, Melissa stood first. Your Honor, we move to introduce a third-party investigative report. It shows evidence of unethical patent acquisition, corporate espionage, and premeditated efforts to discredit the defense. Crewson stood red-faced. This is slander. It's truth, Keanu said softly, rising. He walked up and placed a USB on the judge's bench. Inside is a recorded conversation between two executives at Zebrix Pharma discussing how to manipulate legal process to bankrupt our foundation. Judge, Langford raised a hand. Stop. I will review this privately. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. Keanu walked out of the courtroom into silence. No one cheered. No one booed, because everyone knew. This was the final stretch. And the verdict wouldn't just affect the court. It would ripple across countries, clinics, and hearts. That night, Keanu stood on the balcony of his hotel. Below, a little girl in a wheelchair passed by with her mom. She wore a shirt that said, "Heroic Hearts Heal." She didn't see him, but he saw her, and that was enough. The verdict. That shook the system. The sky was still dark when Keanu Reeves woke up. Not because the sun hadn't risen, it had, but the clouds refused to part. It was the sixth and final day of the case, and the air was heavy with waiting. He stood by the window of his hotel room sipping black coffee, watching cars crawl below like insects with purpose. Across the street stood the courthouse, a building that had once felt foreign. Now it was a battlefield that held every heartbeat he had left. He didn't prepare a statement that morning. He didn't dress differently. He didn't carry lucky charms. He simply breathed in and let out everything he wasn't. The lobby was fuller than ever. This time there were no cameras, not because the media wasn't interested. They were ordered to stay outside. Judge Langford had demanded silence. Today would be about law, not spectacle. But inside, the atmosphere felt like a movie theater before the final scene. Doctors sat in the back rows. Parents clutched their children. Lawyers scribbled last-minute notes. And at the very front, Keanu Reeves sat quietly, hands folded, looking at no one. Melissa Trang whispered, "He's read the recordings. He knows what they did." Keanu didn't answer. He only looked toward the door as it opened. Judge Langford entered. Alone. No staff. No robe flowing dramatically. Just a man holding a decision in his hand. He sat down, adjusted his glasses. Court is now in session. He looked around slowly, then down at his notes. This court has spent the past week reviewing competing claims over the design, ownership, and ethical distribution of a life-saving medical device. His voice was calm. Too calm. We have heard arguments about innovation, fairness, financial transparency, and public interest. And we have seen evidence, some disturbing, regarding corporate intentions and manipulation of legal process. Crewson sat tensely, chewing his lip. I have also reviewed a private recording, Langford continued. That includes damning admissions from executives at Zebrix Pharma, admissions of intent to bankrupt the defendant's nonprofit, to claim patents they did not invent, and to discredit public goodwill through false financial accusations. Cruson stood abruptly. Your Honor, we request that statement be stricken. Langford slammed his gavel. Sit down, Mr. Cruson, and let me finish. The courtroom froze. This court finds the plaintiff's claim of patent ownership to be invalid. We rule that the device in question originated from public domain material, independently engineered, and distributed lawfully. Furthermore, this court recommends an ethics investigation into the firms that initiated this suit under deceptive intentions. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Cruson looked like he had been punched. Judge Langford then turned to Keanu. Mr. Reeves, while unconventional in approach, you acted in accordance with the law, and with something greater, conscience. He paused. This world needs more of that. The gavel dropped. 3 short strikes. But it sounded like thunder. It was over. Keanu didn't move. Not at first. He just closed his eyes. Then he stood, and turned, and the entire room erupted in applause, not cheers of celebration, but something softer, grateful, emotional. People stood. Some cried. Others simply placed hands over hearts. Melissa hugged him tightly. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he replied. Outside, the crowd waited in silence. No one pushed forward. They made a path. And when Keanu stepped out of the courthouse, he didn't speak to the press. He knelt down beside a woman holding a baby, smiled, and touched the child's hand. A nurse walked over next. My patients thank you, she said, wiping tears. He just nodded. Words would fail now. The story went viral. Keanu Reeves defeats corporate lawsuit, saves global medical initiative. A court ruling not just for law, but for humanity. From actor to advocate, Reeves rewrites heroism. Donations poured into the foundation. Volunteers signed up. New clinics requested help. LIFO units doubled in production. And governments started discussions about reforming humanitarian patent law. But Keanu didn't take a victory tour. He went back to work. A month later, he visited a rural clinic in Peru. A little girl ran up to him with a paper flower. For you, she said shyly. Keanu smiled. Thank you. What's your name? Sarah. Do you feel better now? Yes. She nodded proudly. Your machine helps me breathe. He knelt, down beside her. You know what helps me breathe, Sarah? She shook her head. Meeting someone as strong as you. She giggled and hugged him. And in that quiet clinic, with no cameras and no crowds, Keanu Reeves felt more than relief. He felt peace. Back home, Judge Carter was reinstated. Her reputation, once doubted, now stood stronger than ever. She sent him a handwritten note. Thank you for reminding the court why justice was invented. Judge Marlene Carteris for Cruson. He resigned in disgrace, his law license under review. But Keanu never spoke of him again. He didn't need to. His story was never about revenge. It was about redemption, not his own, but of a system people had stopped believing in. He reminded, the world that sometimes one person with truth and courage can face a mountain of lies and move it, not with anger, but with purpose. And when he walked away, he didn't leave behind a courtroom victory. He left behind a legacy. The end.